Hey there, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive. My name is David Valente, and we have a special program this evening talking about the Canadian election. But before we get to that, I want to talk about our LP regional and affiliate campaign training. It's still going on. We've got four more opportunities for you to go out and get trained by the LP in doing either leadership roles within your local affiliate or state party or whatever you want to do, or get trained on how to work in a campaign, whether it's becoming a candidate or a treasurer or whatever role you want to take within a campaign. There's training for you, whether it's social media, all the good stuff. So I can't recommend it highly enough. In fact, let me drop that because I had the link up for you earlier. There it is. Regional and affiliate and campaign training initiative. Go to that link right there. Um, this weekend we're coming up on Des Moines, Iowa. That is our Region 6, technically, but it doesn't matter where you're at in the country. If you want to fly into Des Moines and take part in the training, register and get involved. It's not limited to people in Region 6. We just holding in each of the regions, so it's closer to each of anybody who wants to participate. So, Region 7 is the week after. So, not this weekend, but next weekend is going to be Shreveport, Louisiana. So, if you're in the southeast part of the country, Texas, Oklahoma, come on down to Shreveport for training. In October, we have the final two trainings. The 9th, which I believe is Columbus Day weekend or whatever they're calling it now. That is going to be Region 8 training in Atlantic City, New Jersey. So not only do you get to get some great training, but you can probably go gamble as well. So check that one out if you're in the Northeast. And our final one in the Heartland, Region 3 training in Indianapolis, Indiana. That's going to be the weekend of October 16th. Again, I can't recommend these trainings highly enough because they give you one, you get to meet some great people within national leadership, but you also get some fantastic skills, whether it's social media, treasurers, running a campaign, affiliate leadership. These are great things that you can get involved in, and I can't recommend them highly enough. Um, at the end of tonight's show, we're going to have a little bit of a honoring of a fallen police officer from September 11th, John Perry. So stay tuned for that. Extraordinary life and extraordinary sacrifice on what would have been the day that he turned in his retirement papers. So stay tuned for that. But we're going to go ahead and bring in our guest. On September 20th, the Canadians go to the polls to vote for a new government. We'll talk about why they're going to the polls at that point. But our guest is Tim Moen. He is former party leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada just recently. And well, go ahead and introduce yourself, Tim.
Yeah, sorry. I've been kind of distracted by the signs in the background. West Virginia. I keep thinking of country roads.
Yep.
Take me home. Blue
Yeah.
Ridge Mountains, all that kind of stuff. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm Tim Moen. I was leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada for about 7 years, and we had our convention here back in August, and it just so happened to fall on the same day that Trudeau made a surprise snap election call. So our new leader is being baptized with fire right now. So I've been leader for 7 years. In 2015, I led the party to its most successful showing in our 45-year history. And I've just stepping down. I've only got one retirement fund to cash in. I cashed it in 2015, and so now I got to pay the bills and focus on family and work quite a bit more. So I'm handing the party over to someone who's got some more time to take over the reins. So.
Excellent. So what do you do outside of Libertarian Party politics?
Yeah, well, very much the same as what I do in the party, which is I fight the forces of chaos and entropy that would seek to destroy us all. I'm a firefighter paramedic as my day job, and so I've been doing that my whole life. And so I kind of saw my activism in the Libertarian Party as in large part an extension of that same intent or same process of fighting these mindlessly destructive forces and pushing back against them and restoring order to chaos.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Okay. So how did you become a libertarian?
How did I become a libertarian? Well, I would say that, man, it's a bit of a long story, but I was going through a bit of a life crisis where I was questioning everything, all my fundamental sacred beliefs, including, the religion that I grew up in. And I realized at the time that, had I grown up in another part of the world in another time and with another family, I'd have a completely different worldview. That was deeply unsettling to me. And the other question that was in my mind was, as I was going through history, was, well, what makes me think I would be any different than, all these normal people that acted in evil ways throughout history? If I were in Germany in the 30s and 40s, what makes me think that I wouldn't have been inclined to join the Nazi party and do Nazi things? If I were, in Mao's China, why wouldn't I join the Communist Party? And so that was very unsettling for me to realize that my beliefs had been fully formed essentially by culture, by my environment. And I had almost nothing to do with what I believed about the world, my whole worldview. And so I started questioning everything. And that led me, it started with religion, but it moved to statism, and I discovered Ayn Rand. And actually I'd have to, and, I watched this conspiratorial movie by Aaron Russo called Freedom to Fascism, where he questioned the validity of the income tax. And that kind of blew my mind open. And then, of course, led me to some libertarian ideas. And ultimately, I think it was probably Penn and Teller's show Bullshit that tipped me over the edge. And I'm like, yeah, these guys are speaking my language. I went to Bullshit from kind of the skeptics movement, and I wanted to see them debunk religion and Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and all these wacky conspiracies. But they interspersed a bunch of stuff about the government that made a lot of sense to me. And so I did a deep dive. So I'd have to say it was probably Penn and Jillette Bullshit that tipped me over the edge to libertarianism.
That's awesome. That's probably one of the most awesome stories that I've heard, because I ask all my guests about their kind of libertarian origin stories, and I've really enjoyed that. That's awesome.
Awesome.
So let's level set everyone on the situation in Canada. So
Hmm.
Justin Trudeau is the current Prime Minister of Canada. He represents the Liberal Party of Canada, and we'll get into the ins and outs of each of the parties a little bit later. But he won election in 2019 and has a 5-year mandate to serve, if he can keep it,
Right.
5-year mandate to run government. But he chose to call a snap election. Kind of explain that to, because in the United States we're very familiar with fixed elections, fixed election dates.
Yeah.
Uh, we don't get this snap election thing.
Right. Well, in Canada, it's essentially up to the prime minister to call an election, and he has to call it within 5 years, but he can essentially do it at any time he wants within that 5-year window. And so in 2019, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals formed a minority government. In other words, they didn't have more than half the seats, and so they didn't control the House basically. And so, in order for them to get things done, they required cooperation and support from the other parties that were also holding seats. And of course, they weren't going to get much support from the Conservatives, so it was going to rely on other left-wing parties like the New Democrat Party, the NDP, and the Green Party, which I think had a couple seats as well.
Mhm.
So these minority governments are very unstable in Canada, which is not a bad thing for a libertarian, and they can't get a lot of things done. And I suspect Justin Trudeau called the election because he thought he was just killing it out there, that he was riding an all-time wave of support. And I don't think that was necessarily an unreasonable thing for him to think. I mean, Canadians generally seem to favor all the things that he's doing in terms of handling the pandemic and printing up a bunch of money and handing out money, printing it out and supporting people not having to work and all these kinds of things. So I think he thought he could ride that wave and just might take him to a majority government. And I think that it was in his best interest. I mean, if you were to wait 2 years, he can probably do math and realize that prices are going to be higher. The economy is going to be worse. Like there's going to be a price to pay for all the spending that he's done and all the prohibitions and restrictions that he's implemented over the past year.
Yeah.
And he probably wanted to strike now while he had a chance in his mind of forming a majority government and get that 4 or 5 year mandate to actually push some of his agenda items through. So I suspect that's why he called a snap election.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the dissolution, the Liberals had about 155 seats, and they need 170 for a majority government. They have 388 seats in the legislature now. It's
Yeah.
interesting because Canada, based on population, now I know that the way that they apportion seats in Canada is kind of convoluted, but by per person in the country, so each seat is about 105,000 people. Honestly, that's the interesting thing about that is that if we did that in the United States, the it would be about 3,000 seats in our legislature.
Right. Right.
So that's amazing. And is that me making that sound? Or is that are you?
Hold on.
Okay.
That might have been
Okay. Cool.
background noise here.
Cool. But yeah, we would have about 3,000 seats in our legislature based on the population, because it's about 750,000 to 800,000 people in each of our seats now. So,
Right.
but
Yeah, that would be fantastic in one sense. It seems like it would be a lot harder to get things through, but if we're talking about size of government, I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing.
yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I've actually advocated tripling the legislature and slashing their salaries to about 20%. And building
that might be a good idea. And it does call into question, when you think about 3,000 representatives in this, so trying to represent your, the idea that that's a unified group that can run this whole country. It's kind of silly, right? It calls into question the need for there to have that unity to begin with. Maybe be better off splitting off. Maybe it's a good time to talk about secession and letting states actually do the stating rather than the federal government do the stating or something.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be a mixed bag as well because it's still a
Yeah.
state. But I get your point. Well, so you mentioned that the big thing that's coming out. The reason why he's really pushing for this election right now is that he's seen as doing reasonably well with COVID, at least poll wise. What is the situation in Canada with COVID right now?
Well, I mean, it sucks. I'm not gonna lie. Ultimately, it's mostly up to the provinces to determine how they're going to implement policy, and so different provinces are taking different approaches. In Alberta, where I live, for example, it's often been described as the Texas of Canada. I wish it were more the Texas of Canada, but our premier has said that he will not be mandating vaccine passports, that it's up to businesses and to decide whether they want proof of vaccination or not. Other provinces are going ahead and mandating things. Now, that being said, the federal government is coordinating it sounds like they're trying to set a standard or implement a standardized vaccine passport that the provinces can choose to adopt or not. And so our province, our health ministry has basically sent everyone who's gotten vaccinated and their health information to the federal government, which some of us who are vaccinated aren't too pleased about. That's kind of my information. I prefer to control who gets to see that and not. But in terms of what's going on now on the ground, we're going through another wave of this Delta variant, and so our province has issued mask mandates again. So anywhere you go in public, you have to have masks. Again, we're talking about the vaccination mandates and ramping those up. And so, for example, in Alberta, I'm a healthcare provider. I'm a paramedic, and there's a single provider of healthcare in the province, and that's Alberta Healthcare Services. Private healthcare is prohibited. I can't start a community paramedic service and serve, geriatric patients in my community and treat them in their home. I can't find willing customers and do anything like that. I have to work for the single employer. And so now they're mandating that we all get vaccinated by a certain date. And, that's fair enough. If you're a private employer, you should be able to do what you want. I suspect there's going to be some constitutional challenges here in Canada because governments typically can't restrict. They certainly can't restrict service for vaccination status like private businesses can, especially when you have one. And so remains to be seen whether the constitutional challenges that will come will support the same thing for employment, whether they are going to be able to discriminate on those grounds or not, given that they are the one employer in town and no one can leave that employer and go start a competing business or something like that. But
you're essentially condemning people to poverty to over the vaccine. And it's the same thing that we're seeing now in the United States with the new mandate by the Biden administration that lots of people who are going to be forced out of, either their current position, seek new positions, and people might lose jobs because they're, the company's maybe right at that 100 person level and they want to get underneath it to be able to avoid some of the mandates. So, I mean, it's an interesting time to put in these mandates where you're already having issues with supply chains. You're already having issues with, worker availability, and then you're going to throw a bunch of workers out, out the door and further.
Well, yes, and I mean these are workers that have, they're now considered too dangerous to come to work. But for the last year and a half, or the year prior to the vaccine, we've been coming to work into high viral loads and into uncontrolled situations and dealing with sick people face to face. And we've never been told we're too dangerous to come to work. In fact, they called us essential in that society might just break down without us coming to work. Not only were we not dangerous coming to work, it was essential that we go to work. We didn't have any government supported layoffs or work from home capability. We had to go out there in the trenches, and they needed us to, and we weren't considered dangerous then. And so it's a little bit rich for them to now say that, oh, if you're not vaccinated, it's too dangerous. Now, by the way, I am vaccinated. I'm on the other side of the fence. I couldn't wait to get the vaccine. I was pissed off that it took so long to get it. I should have been able to get it the weekend after they sequenced the genome, almost a year earlier. And I should have the right to experiment with myself and take an experimental agent, if I want. But I can certainly appreciate why other people wouldn't want to take it. And I am offended that they're demanding me, treating me like a child and saying, you need to show us proof that you have this. Well, if I wasn't too dangerous before I got the vaccine, what makes you, before the vaccine was available, what makes you think I'm dangerous now? It's it's a little insulting to say the least, but
It is. And, a lot of people don't realize now Toronto is like what the third or fourth largest city on the continent. And with COVID, Toronto went from March until I think about June under a lockdown status, didn't they?
Yeah. I can't remember the exact date, but yeah, Toronto, Ontario got it hard. I mean, Alberta, we got it hard too, but most of the provinces, again, that's one thing that's different, I think, about the US political climate versus the Canadian political climate, is that we are much more, Canadians in general are much more agreeable, let's say, to being stomped on, to having our rights taken. We almost demand it, and so it had fairly wide support. Now that support for all these mandates, I think, is waning quite a bit. But for the first 6 months, I would say you were certainly in the tiny minority if you were opposing all these mandates and restrictions. And of course, that's nothing new for libertarians. We're always in the minority, but we're also right on the right side of history. So
exactly. So another story that's creeped up during the campaign is the withdrawal from Afghanistan. How big of an issue has that been in Canada over the last 15, 20 days?
It's almost been a non-issue here,
Really?
to be honest. I mean, the Conservatives did make some noise about Trudeau and his withdrawal, but they didn't have a lot to stand on. All Trudeau said was, "Look, our withdrawal was tied to Biden's date, and we just followed his lead here. What did you want us to do?" kind of thing. And so there's that. I mean, I really wish that Canadians would look at our involvement in foreign policy a lot more. We've had 2 terrorist attacks in the last decade or so, if I recall. There was a shooting at Parliament. A gunman went right into Parliament, shot a soldier that was standing guard at the cenotaph, a memorial, and then went in and started firing in Parliament until this 70-some-year-old staffer grabbed a gun out of his, that I don't think he was even supposed to have, out of his drawer, and did a kind of diving, like, badass thing and shot the guy, put him down. But I mean, these terrorists specifically referenced Canada's involvement in foreign policy as the motivating factor behind it. And the one was happening right after, like, I think within a week or two after Canada committed to joining Hillary's bombing of Libya. And so we sent a bunch of warplanes over there to bomb Libya. And of course, some people get upset by that, and they do, motivated by that. And, so I wish people would address that a little bit more. I wish that we would hold our politicians' feet to the fire a bit more on that. We are selling weapons to Saudis right now to commit genocide in Yemen. I wish more Canadians cared about that, but it doesn't seem to be much of an issue here in Canada. It's just not talked about that much or in the news that much.
Yeah, and we just, of course, we went through our 20th anniversary of September 11th, and one thing that I'm sure the same holds true in Canada, that American voters don't get the concept of blowback at all.
Right.
That if we understood the concept of blowback, then you probably wouldn't have as much support for these military adventurism as we've gone through the last 30 years here in the United States.
Yeah.
But what other big issues are going on in the Canadian election at this point?
Right. Well, I think the main parties are talking about, the latest one in the last week has been gun control.
Mhm.
And, there was a very unpopular and draconian dictate that came down. It's in Canada, or I think in the US, you have these executive orders by your president. In Canada, our equivalent here is an order in council from the Governor General, which is the Queen's representative. But essentially, it comes from the Prime Minister. He hands it to the Governor General, and assuming the Queen doesn't kibosh it, it then comes down to the rest of us as kind of like an executive order. And there was an executive order banning assault-style weapons in Canada. And there was a huge list of them. And on that list, I believe there was like some airsoft guns, basically anything that looked like it was military, that was dressed up like a military. It had absolutely no grounding in form, in like function of the gun, like caliber, length of barrel, power, anything that actually makes the gun function at in a more powerful way. And it had strictly to do with, you got the impression that they just laid out a bunch of pictures, and that one looks scary, that one looks really scary, that one, and that's how they banned these things. And so, of course, gunnies were incensed by this, and it was a huge deal. And so Aaron O'Toole has initially, the Conservative Party leader initially said that he would repeal, and I think it's right there written in his platform that he would repeal this order in council. And then he thought twice about it in the past week and kind of flip-flopped and said, well, he'd form a committee to look at the weapons that were banned and see if it made sense or something like that. And of course, Trudeau pounced on this and called him a flip-flopper, and the Conservatives were pissed off about this because he promised something and now seems to be reneging on it. But what's happening is, Aaron O'Toole is essentially doing what he feels he needs to do to get votes, and that means in Canada to pander to the left really hard. Canada is very left-leaning. I mean, probably for the last 3 decades, you wouldn't dare talk about reforming healthcare and even allowing free market healthcare to run alongside public healthcare. Yeah. You just do not touch universal healthcare in Canada at all and expect to get any votes. And so, the Conservatives have typically looked very similar to the Democrats in the US in terms of their actual policy. And the Liberals are even further left than that. And the NDP, we won't even talk about them. They're basically outright communists. But so Aaron O'Toole is running this very left-leaning platform, and he's pissing off a lot of conservative voters, his base, the so-called true conservatives. And this happens every few years. We saw this in the 90s in Canada. We had the Progressive Conservative Party, and they started drifting too far left and sort of left some of their really hardcore base behind. And they formed this other party called the Reform Party, and they split the vote between the conservative vote. And of course, the left continued to win during that time. And then they eventually reformed and united under the Conservative Party of Canada so that they could defeat the left. But of course, in order to win, they have to have left-wing policies. And so conservatives in Canada do this all the time, where they break apart and split the vote because the establishment Conservative Party is going too far left. And then, the new party kind of picks up steam. And right now in Canada, that's the PPC, the People's Party of Canada, just kind of a populist right-wing party run by Maxime Bernier. And so he's branded his party as the true Conservative Party in Canada.
Yeah. And
they're pushing back hard against the mandates, and they're actually picking up a lot of steam because of this, because they're the only visible party out there. I wish the Libertarian Party was more visible, because we've been against this long before Bernier and his party. But they're the ones making the biggest splash about it right now, and they're picking up a lot of support from people. And so I suspect we'll see another. It might not be this election, but if they keep picking up steam, we're going to see the conservative vote really split, and they're going to be thrown into disarray, and eventually they'll reunite and establish themselves again as a center left or just center right party, I guess. But sorry, I'm missing some of these questions. Should I be?
No. We'll get to the questions. So let's start talking about. I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about the parties, the main parties of Canada. So let's dive into the Libertarian Party of Canada. Of course, you just had a leadership election, and is Jacques Boudreau is the
Jacques Boudreau, yeah.
All right, and where's he from?
Jacques Boudreau is from Ontario, I believe, on Ottawa. I think I could be wrong, but
okay,
he's out east. And Jacques is he's a good guy. He beat out 4 other really quality candidates at our convention, and he's a recently retired insurance actuary who's got a lot of time on his hands, and he's very principled, hardcore libertarian, kind of in the Austrian economist vein, and economics seems to be his primary focus and kind of the world he comes from. So I'll be interested to see what he can do. I'm hoping he can pick up steam. But the Libertarian Party has kind of been we've took a real hit in the past 4 years, in part because of the rise of the People's Party and Maxime Bernier bleeding quite a few libertarians into that party. I think a lot of them have kind of left or come back to us, kind of being disillusioned. It turns out the PPC is more of a populist party, that isn't as true to libertarianism as folks had hoped, and also due in part because I've had to step back more and focus on my career, so I haven't been able to dedicate the time needed to lead the party and really pick up momentum. So the Libertarian Party right now is kind of in a rebuilding phase, but we're like herpes. We erupt every now and then and make a splash, but we're always there. We're always there. You can't get rid of us. Is that a bad analogy? I don't know.
That's awesome. So how many seats are they contesting this election?
So there's three. It's the full general election, so 338 seats. The leader of the party that gets the most seats usually becomes the prime minister. I mean, ultimately, it's up to the Queen, but usually the leader of. So that's a little bit different in Canada. We don't vote directly for a prime minister like you vote for your president. We just vote for our local candidate, and if whichever party picks up the most seats, that leader becomes the party. So, if the Libertarian Party gets the most seats, the leader of the Libertarian Party becomes the prime minister.
Is the Libertarian Party running a full slate?
No, we are not at all this year. In fact, I don't know how many seats we're contesting at all right now. I've taken a break, trying, to center myself again. It's been a long 7-year grind, and so I'm just kind of taking a hiatus, a little vacation.
And you're not running, are you?
No, I'm not running. No.
Okay.
I just don't have the energy or the time or the motivation to do it this time around. I need a break.
So you mentioned the People's Party of Canada,
Yeah,
and you did mention that they're a split off from the Conservative Party. Maxime Bernier used to be a Conservative Party leader that he ran for the leadership of the party and lost to Andrew Scheer a few years ago. And Andrew Scheer lost the election, so he's been replaced by Aaron O'Toole as the Conservative Party leader. But do you think that they're going to see a breakthrough this time? Do you think that they're going to get a seat in Parliament? Because they're polling around 4 or 5%.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you look at what you have to do to look to see if they're going to get a seat is not look at the popular vote. You have to look at each riding and the vote totals in the ridings, right? And so, for example, in the last election, Andrew Scheer in the Conservative Party actually won the popular vote, but the Liberals still got more seats than them. And that's because in Western Canada, it's always Conservative, but we don't have as many seats as Eastern Canada.
Sure.
So if you win by 20,000 votes in a Western riding, it still only counts for one seat. Doesn't equate to more seats.
Yeah.
So the only riding where the PPC actually have a chance is in Maxime Bernier's riding. Right now, it looks like it's a toss-up between, it's a neck and neck race between the Conservatives candidate and him. So I do hope Bernier wins his seat. I hope that he can get in there and make some noise, and that Libertarians might like. He's been good to my ear on the pandemic and the mandate. He was a little bit late to the party. I think he was waiting to feel out how his base, what his base was thinking. And initially, I know that the populist kind of conservative base was, when the left was downplaying the pandemic in the early days, we're getting all these startling images coming out of China as the pandemic spread. And I remember the populist right here was saying we need to lock down the borders, and government needs all it. So I think Bernier was a little gun shy to come out swinging against any kind of pandemic measures to begin with. Unlike the Libertarians, we were always against them. But in the last 6 months, for sure, he has been leading the charge against all these mandates and going coast to coast. And so it'd be nice to see his voice in Parliament. So they may pick up one seat. But if they manage to pick up that one seat, I think they're going to be able to build from there and eventually become like the Reform Party. Okay. And then eventually become again the centrist establishment party once they're actually in a position to form government. Unfortunately, that's just how politics works. If you focus on chasing votes, you have to sacrifice principle. And so, my philosophy as party leader, and what I think the philosophy of all kind of activist libertarians should be, is to focus on a principled message and make people come to us, not chase those votes around. We have to shift culture before we can ever see a libertarian government, in my mind. But.
Sure. So the other minor party that'll be contesting is the Green Party of Canada,
Yes.
by Anne-Marie Paul.
Anna May Paul is the leader of that party, and they're facing quite a bit of internal strife right now. There's been some people that have been trying to get rid of her. They weren't happy with her. I can't remember what she said, something about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and I'm guessing it wasn't as pro-Palestine as a lot of her party members would have liked, and so they're attacking her pretty strong. But I believe she has a Jewish background or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think she had as strongly pro-Palestinian take as they would have liked. There's also another party I should make you aware of in Western Canada here, called the Maverick Party, which is a brand new party started up this year that is trying to be similar to the Bloc Québécois party. Now, the Bloc is a very powerful party in Quebec. They only run candidates in Quebec. They consider Quebec to be a sovereign nation, separate from Canada, and so that they just send representatives to Parliament to do a Quebec first, Quebec interest type thing, represent Quebec's interests basically. And so the Maverick Party is trying to do something similar in Western Canada, because out west, Western alienation is a huge thing in Canada under our Confederation, and even written into our Constitution are these equalization payments that the have-not provinces get payouts from the federal government, and of course. Most of the money is being made in provinces like mine in Alberta, and the taxpayers send their money to the feds, and the feds then send it to Quebec and these other have-not provinces that implement all these kind of socialistic government spending programs. And Alberta, and then Quebec turns around and blocks a pipeline. We're trying to get our product to the market, and all these things start to happen. So the West is very bitter about the fact that we pay for all of Canada's infrastructure and we get nothing in return for it. In fact, we get blocked at every turn when we try to get our product to market. And of course, we're a big oil and gas province. Yeah. We have the infamous oil sands in our province that gets a bad rep from all these Hollywood elite that fly up to our oil sands to talk about how we're killing the planet, committing genocide on Indigenous people, and then fly home on their CO2 emitting private jets. So Western alienation is the thing. So the Maverick parties kind of sprung up, and they seem to be picking up some steam out here in Western Canada. So if you're kind of a conservative, liberty-oriented guy, you have a bunch of choices now. You have the PPC, you have the Maverick, you have the Conservative Party of Canada, you have the Libertarian Party. It's a noisy field to try to get any kind of message or get any signal through right now. And then, you have, I think there are about 22 political parties in Canada. And it is a busy place. It's not that hard to start a political party and get your name on a ballot here in Canada.
So, that's awesome. I'd love to see more parties here in the United States. But so is just like the Bloc, then the Maverick, are they looking for some kind of separation? Because the Bloc, their stated goal is to create the conditions for separation of Quebec from Canada. Is that the same for the Mavericks?
Well, I don't get the impression from the Maverick Party that they're quite as hardcore, that they're secessionists or separatists in that manner. But I do think that their primary goal, I think what they are, for the past, 3 or 4 years, there's been a growing separatist movement in Western Canada, especially in Alberta. And there's been a lot of Alberta first and we need to separate talk going on. And it hasn't been very unified. There's no coherent political philosophy behind it or no unifying force. There's just a general hatred of Justin Trudeau and what we in Canada call the Laurentian elite. All these people from Upper Canada who want to run the West and don't care about us. They just want to suck. So, but compare that to Quebec, where it's very kind of an aspirational kind of nationalism that they have. There's a common core identity, the Quebecois, the language, all these cultural things. In fact, they enforce these cultural things with their government, and they enforce French language laws and all these other things. So we don't have that cohesion here in Western Canada. So I think the Maverick Party is doing their best to try to unify that sentiment of separatism, and maybe people that aren't quite separatists under a kind of a less controversial brand that everyone can kind of unify under.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how well they do, because they don't have that same aspirational kind of message that the Bloc does about nationhood and our identity, right? There is really no clear identity in Western Canada. We are a diaspora of different people with different political philosophies and life outlooks and ideas of what our nation should look like and that sort of thing.
Sure. So let's talk about the three big parties, the ones that, well, four big parties that could play a role in the election. So let's start with we talked a little bit about them, the Bloc Québécois. Again, this is a party that only there's no real kind of matching party in the United States to this one, because it only runs in one province, in Quebec. Again, their stated goal is to create the situations that would allow them to be an independent state. They gained a bunch of seats in the last election. Do you think that they're going to gain more seats in this election?
I think from what the last polls I saw, their popularity is declining a little bit. Which surprises me a little bit. Out of I watched the leaders debate this past weekend, I think it was, and the guy that impressed me the most was actually the leader of the Bloc Québécois. He was very blunt and honest and direct, and I hadn't really heard him speak. He's always speaking French, but this was an English language debate, and so I actually heard what he was saying for the first time. And I just, as a person, I kind of liked him. I liked that he was standing up for his province, and that he bluntly said, "I'm not running for prime minister. I'm running for Quebecers and to make sure our interests are looked after. And all of you recognize that we're a nation. You won't deny it, and that's what I'm here to represent." But I suspect that they are going to be losing some seats, and it's strange, because actually after the debate, the Liberals started picking up steam. Now, next to the Yves Blanchette from the Bloc Québécois, I felt like Aaron O'Toole and the Conservative Party actually would have gained the most ground, because while he didn't say anything great, he sounded like the adult in the room. He sounded like something that a general Canadian, the normie voters that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, if they were tired of Trudeau and they're looking for an alternative that wasn't Trudeau, O'Toole wasn't that far off of Trudeau's policies, but he actually sounded like an adult. And so I thought O'Toole would have maybe gained some ground, but it doesn't seem like he is. It seems like the Liberals are picking up steam, and I think they're bleeding support from the NDP, because the NDP is they've got these pie in the sky ideas. They don't have a clear plan. They just announced like $200 and some billion in spending, and Canadians are like, well, where's this money going to come from? I mean, we could see maybe 50 billion or 100 billion, but 200 billion, that seems like way too much. And he wasn't able to answer. So I think the Liberals are gaining ground because of Jagmeet Singh losing support and the NDP losing support. And I think that the Conservatives are losing ground a little bit because of the rise of the People's Party of Canada. And this, if you were a tried and true Conservative watching Aaron O'Toole on the debate stage, you probably weren't all that impressed. The only people that were probably impressed were people that could go either way, that weren't really ideologically, predisposed to one tribe or the other. But those are the people that I think might have been swayed by O'Toole, but it seemed like he may have turned more people off towards the PPC than he gained from that centrist group.
Yeah, it's interesting because looking at the news over the last week, you would think that, and since the campaign started, you'd think that Trudeau is losing support to both the Conservatives and the NDP, and that I guess since Aaron O'Toole he's bland. I mean, I'll give you that. He is a very bland,
Right.
just a politician. I mean, that they're
Yeah.
and he has made it a very salient point to really just move his party to the center
Yeah.
of Canadian politics to try and triangulate between the NDP and Justin Trudeau and drag Trudeau off to the left.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, if you're the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and your goal is to form government, I don't know what you would do differently than what O'Toole is doing, right? I mean, you certainly can't run a Trumpian campaign in Canada. Canadians just don't respond to that. There's a small minority of populists that maybe are Bernier supporters that would support that, but by and large, people are turned off by that. And so I think he's playing it exactly the way he needs to. I think he's running it, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. I just think there's too much division. And now the tribes are forming very strongly on the margins, and those margins are growing. And so I don't know how he can break through. Now, the one thing that may change things. So right now, it looks like the Liberals, like the Conservatives and the Liberals are neck and neck in terms of the popular vote. They're right at, I think they're both at like 36%. Or 34% or something like that. But in terms of seat counts, the Liberals are ahead by, I want to say the last polls I saw like 20 seats or so. But those 20 seats are very tentative. Like they could easily swing back the other way. They're in kind of, Ontario seems to be the deciding factor. There's a lot of ridings that go blue and then red and blue and red, and they just bounce back and forth depending on the political winds. And so the thing that could tip things back towards O'Toole's favor in those ridings is this book that is, I think it was just released today or yesterday by Jody Wilson-Raybould, who is a former Liberal member of Parliament. In fact, she was the Justice Minister. She was in Justin Trudeau's cabinet, Indigenous person, very learned in terms of law. And there was a big scandal here with this company called SNC-Lavalin, which is a giant corporation that gets all sorts of sweet government contracts. It's one of the government's favorite companies to give taxpayer money to, and they were involved in a scandal in Libya, rebuilding Libya and taking bribes from officials there against Canadian law and different things like that. And Justin Trudeau, it is alleged, tried to sway his Justice Minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to not press charges, to drop the charges, to find a way to let SNC-Lavalin off the hook. And so it will be interesting to see what bombshells, if any, come out of her book about that talks about that whole scandal and what happened. So that if that gets a lot of press this week, we could see Trudeau's support start to decline.
I saw that she actually does say that he pressured her to lie and to not go after the company. So this could be a major issue, even though it actually was played out in the last election and it didn't hurt him. But this is a little bit harder of an accusation, and of course the timing is not good for him.
Well, yes, and it was kind of there was probably, I think there was 2 or 3 female politicians or like Liberal MPs that essentially left in disgust and accused Trudeau of misogyny and all the things that he's supposed to not be, right? He portrays himself as this feminist social justice warrior. And Anime Paul, the leader of the Green Party in the debate, kept bringing up their names over and over again and saying, I'm standing here defending the rights of women like Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott and all these people that, and so you could see Trudeau kind of start to squirm a little bit. But I don't know, our debates are boring and they're almost unwatchable, to be honest. Like they're like US debates, but without the entertainment factor at all. And so I don't know how. I had to turn it off after an hour. I couldn't watch anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so let's talk about the NDP, the way left. Now, for people in the United States, the NDP I would liken to Bernie or AOC.
Mhm.
It's kind of in that same vein.
Yeah,
Democrat.
it'd be like if Bernie and AOC started their own party and got
Yeah.
all those types of people together
In
in a
fact,
party.
AOC has done some things with Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the party.
That does
Um,
surprise me. Yeah.
online stuff. I think they've done like a couple Twitch things where they play games together. It's really kind of weird, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Singh is really trying to appeal to the youth voters, and he's a fairly youthful guy who's out there doing things like video games and using like cultural, like whatever the hip cultural slang is at the time, and the little viral TikTok things and
Yeah,
all those things. So he's coming off as this cool guy that a young person can relate to, and that really cares about young people, right?
and he wants to give them a lot of money. And
Oh, he wants to give them a ton of money. Yeah, I mean, he wants a national pharmacare program. He wants, I think, he wants to erase student debt and make post education or post secondary education free. Yeah, he's very
yeah,
very left.
he finally announced his plan to pay for his programs. Uh, Not going to raise taxes on the middle class, which is always a laugh when you hear politicians.
Yeah, he's just going to tax the super rich.
Yeah, it's just the rich are going to pay their fair share.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, among the adults that actually watch the debate and pay attention to what's going on, Jagmeet Singh came off as kind of a pie in the sky, no real plan as to how this is going to work, and I think that is costing him some support among voters that aren't just like dreamy-eyed youth.
And of course, that's always the hardest group to get out to go vote. So I mean, maybe his support is overstated, but there's a good chance that he actually does influence the outcome of this election because he can turn some of those Ontario districts uh, into three-way races and hammer
Yes.
support from the Liberals. So he could actually influence those ridings and throw it to the Conservative Party.
Well, yeah, I mean, it also depends how well the PPC do on the other side splitting the vote, right?
Sure.
The biggest thing I hear in BoomerCon circles that I frequent in social media, like gun groups and stuff like that, is just rage against the PPC for daring to split the votes and giving us 4 more years of the Turdo, and the liberals, right? So
Oh,
there's
you guys have
it's
too, huh?
juicy, it's delicious listening to the wailing and crying and gnashing of teeth over how well the PPC is doing.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, the PPC arguably cost the Conservative Party 6 or 7 seats in the last election. And I think they could cost the Conservative Party even more seats this election by just taking enough off of the seat, off the Conservative counts and those riding. Now, that being said, it's not clear to me that they're just picking up Conservative votes. It sounds like they are saying it's very similar to how Libertarians pick up an equal amount of votes from the left and right from disaffected voters. The
Yeah.
PPC is picking up kind of an equal amount of votes from the left and the right. So it's not entirely clear that they will be spoilers for the Conservatives, but I think they will play a big part, and I think that may be a good thing. I mean, I certainly think the Conservative Party needs to be punished for its crimes against liberty, and but I just don't see how it ends any other way than eventually. To me, the logical extension of the success of the PPC would be them reestablishing a centrist Conservative Party once again in order to form government. I mean, that's what you have to do if you want to fill those seats and get power. You have to reflect culture, and so unless they're successful in shifting culture, I think they're going to have to shift and adjust to what culture is telling them. And so it's unfortunate. I'm excited by what's happening with the PPC. I'm also disappointed because I offered Bernier my spot as leader of the Libertarian Party after he lost his leadership race to Andrew Scheer in I think it was 2015, 2016, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I invited him to take my spot as leader, and I thought he could have been great. I thought he could have been, something like our Ron Paul or Harry Brown if he had stuck with libertarianism. He was kind of a libertarian-leaning candidate in the leadership race, in stark contrast to Kelly Leitch and her populism and her anti-immigration stance and values testing for immigrants and all this kind of stuff. And Bernier was like, we don't need a Trump-like figure in Canada, and immigration is the backbone of Canadian society. And of course, now he's, the biggest thing that got him most support when he launched his party was his anti-immigration platform and coming out swinging as a populist. But I wish that he had taken up my offer to lead the Libertarian Party, because I just think of where the Liberty movement could be right now if he were the front man, if he had been the front man of our party for the past 3 years, and he's got a six-figure pension from his time in Parliament, where he doesn't have to do anything but travel across Canada and be an activist. And he's raising enough money from his party that he can draw also a six-figure salary from his party. So he's making bank and having a lot of fun and traveling across Canada. I just wish it were with a strong libertarian message. I just think about how great that would be and what a moment it would be for liberty. So part of me is excited by what the PPC is doing, and part of me is sad at the lost opportunity.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the Liberal Party. They are, you said that the Conservative Party is kind of an analog to the Democratic Party here. At least that's what they've been running as this election.
Yeah.
What would you kind of liken the Liberal Party, or is it like the United States where it's really kind of two sides of the same coin?
They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
It's hard to distinguish the two parties for me, and I think for a lot of libertarians and a lot of Canadians, really, other than the rhetoric from the leaders, right? Justin Trudeau talks a big game about feminism and social justice and this and that. Aaron O'Toole is a more steadfast, stiff-lipped, conservative father type. Justin Trudeau's the loving mother. O'Toole's a stern father. But at the end of the day, are their policies really that much different? The family policy is the family policy, and it doesn't sway too much. Certainly Aaron O'Toole, I think, would like to, I remember, I think some footage came out recently of him that made big rounds in the leftist circles about him talking to the National Firearms Association, which is kind of Canada's equivalent to the NRA. Mm-hmm. And they were asking him, why doesn't he push concealed carry in Canada? And he said, it's not politically viable. He said, I would love to be able to advance something like that, but there's no way I can talk about that and seriously expect to get anywhere in terms of seat counts. And of course, his sentiments are what is making the left apoplectic. Yeah. But the reality is, we're not going to get concealed carry under O'Toole, no matter how scared the left is that they might, and no matter how hopeful the right is that they might. Right. So, at the end of the day, the policy is going to be very similar, and their platforms aren't that much dissimilar, as far as I can tell.
All right. Well, Tim, we're rapidly running out of time, but I did want to get your prediction for September 20th. Where do you see the Liberals falling? Where do you see the Conservatives falling? And who forms government?
Yeah, well, my prediction right when Trudeau called the snap election was that the Liberals are going to win, and I wasn't sure whether they're going to form a majority or minority, but. And then it changed last week when I saw the polls and I saw Trudeau tanking and O'Toole rising, that it might be a Conservative, and I might be wrong. But no, I think I'm going to be right. I think it's going to be another minority Liberal government, and that's that. And then I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Conservatives, the Conservative movement, and right-wing politics here in Canada and how they're going to recover and how they're, at the end of the day, history repeats itself, and conservatives get tired of losing, and they unite. They put aside their differences and they unite to get the left-wing guy out of there. So it'll be interesting for me to see what happens in Canadian politics over the next little while, for sure.
Yeah. So my prediction is that Trudeau is going to lose seats. He's going to be down in the 140s. The Conservatives probably be up in the 130s, and he'll form another minority government. I don't know if it's going to be a formal or informal minority government, but I think the NDP is going to have enough influence on him and drag him further and further to the left,
Right.
and because they'll have to get to 170.
Yeah.
And you will see a second election before the term of this mandate would have run out. So
I think you're right. Poor Jacques is going to be thrown into another one. It'd be nice to give that guy a little breathing room before. Yeah, you're right. And one of the things that Canadians, I know certainly your American audience, but I don't even think Canadians know this, is that even if the Conservatives were to form, say, a narrow minority government, that doesn't necessarily mean that Justin Trudeau goes away as Prime Minister, because the other left-wing governments or left-wing parties can throw their support behind Trudeau, and he could still remain our Prime Minister. So it's I think in either way, it's going to be an interesting time in Canadian politics over the next little while.
Yeah, and all just because Justin Trudeau wanted to take advantage of COVID a little bit early, and
Yeah.
and he's. I mean, honestly, I don't think he would have had too much. Well, you're right. The bills eventually would have come due on all the money that he's been spending, but um, it would have happened either way, whether he just stayed in or he does win the election next week. So. Um,
Yeah.
But anyway, Tim, I'm sorry we didn't get to some. We did kind of answer some of the questions as we talked. There was one that talked about NDP making serious gains to force Trudeau into a coalition government. I think that's the coalition that's going to go forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're going to need some NDP support, anyways. I mean, if we'll put it this way, if the Conservatives win by a narrow margin, I think you'll see a coalition government form between the NDP and the Liberals. But yeah, I mean, the left is going to win. It's a leftist culture, and culture trumps your politics. So yeah.
Yeah, we had so many great questions. I appreciate everyone jumping in tonight. And
Yeah, sorry guys. Listen, if you want to follow me, Facebook friend me on social media, you can. I have a website called timmoen.net where all my links are, and I'm putting out blogs there regularly. Subscribe to my newsletter. I'm about to publish an article explaining in explicit principle detail what the Libertarian stance on mandates and pandemics should be. I think that all the arguments being used against mandates are bad arguments. Essentially, they are, all centered around risk, and the pandemic isn't that bad. Therefore, we don't need mandates. Well, I say that even if the pandemic was a severe emergency, we wouldn't need mandates, and I explain why that is and what libertarians should stand for in that article. So if you want to get that kind of information, go to timmoen.net and sign up for my newsletter. It's free, and look forward to seeing you there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for doing this. The reason why I do these international, even though this is the U.S. Libertarian Party, it's their Facebook page and their YouTube pages, that we need to have some awareness of what's going on in the world. It used to be that Americans didn't really have to care about what was going on politically. I think that changed in 2016 when that populism that we saw getting Donald Trump elected actually started in Europe, and it started moving towards the United States rather than the United States initiating that, which had been the case for a lot of political revolutions around the world. So, we do need to keep our eyes on foreign elections and see what's going on with those elections because, well, one, it broadens our horizons, allows us to see how other people do things, and whether they're doing them well or doing them poorly. Uh, all kinds of lessons can be drawn from that, but it also, it when we see people fighting elections like we fight elections, it kind of gives us a kinship with people throughout the world, and I think
Yeah.
that one thing we need to realize is that governments, we can hate a government, but the people of the country generally are the victims of the government of that country. So
Yes.
to understand that those people bleed just like we do. Those people have wants and needs just like we do, and that we need to understand that, and that way we don't get put into these false traps of, oh, we got to hate the Afghans because the Taliban. We got to hate the Iranians because of the Islamic Republic. No, we need to hate the governments, not the people. So
That's right. Yeah.
anyway,
Well said.
thank you. Well, thank you again, Tim. The last segment of my show, I wanted to, of course, we did the 20th anniversary of September 11th the other day. One of the people that we lost in that on that day was a guy named John Perry. And let me just share this. All right, this gentleman, John Perry. Let me read a little bit from the article, or actually, it was on the Libertarian Party website. In 2018, he was named to the was it the Hall of Liberty. On In September 11th, 2001, John Perry was an avid libertarian and a member of the New York City Police Department. Mr. Perry was at police headquarters in Lower Manhattan to file his retirement papers. He was planning to leave the police force to join a small immigration law firm. When the notice of the catastrophe hit the World Trade Center, when that came over the radio, Mr. Perry immediately left to help rescue citizens from the burning buildings. He was last seen in the mezzanine of the South Tower shortly before it collapsed. When the building began to collapse, the police captain warned Mr. Perry to evacuate, but he insisted on staying as long as there were people still inside. The captain barely got out in time, and he saw Mr. Perry disappear under the dust of the building. Mr. Perry was a member of the Nassau County Liberties Union, was active in the Police Brutality Commission, and volunteered for Norman Siegel's campaign for public advocate. As a libertarian and a police officer, John was dedicated to defending everyone's right to life, liberty, and property. Richard Cooper Richard Cooper of the Libertarian Party of New York. He's a true hero and a great libertarian. Prior to joining the NYPD, Mr. Perry worked as an immigration lawyer. He also worked as an extra in many films and had a recurring character role on the TV soap opera Another World. And he received the Jefferson Award in 2002. I don't say this very often, but thank you for your service, John Perry. All honor to your name. All honor to those people who lost their lives on September 11th. All honor to the people who were the innocents who have been killed in the years since. And never forget what we've done in the name of fighting this war. And may we find peace soon. But anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. Next week we will be having candidates from states like Virginia, Ohio, North Carolina, talking about their campaigns as early voting starts with the early voting starts for the 2021 elections. I keep calling it 2019. The 2021 elections. So we're featuring those candidates, and you can ask them questions, donate to their campaigns, get involved in their campaigns if you're local to them. I really appreciate everyone joining us this evening. So stay tuned for that After Dark program tonight. I've got an early day and a long day tomorrow. So anyway, thank you, everyone, and we will see everyone next week. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive. We air every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can get regular updates on our show and our guests by following us on social media on Facebook.com/ThePoliticalDeepDive, all one word, on Twitter.com/PoliticalDeep, all one word, on YouTube.com/Papaduke, PAPADUKE, on Twitch.tv, The Political Deep Dive, all one word, and on Mondays, the audio of this episode is uploaded to SoundCloud.com/The Political Deep Dive, all one word. And you can join in on the fun on Instagram.com/The Political Deep Dive, all one word. The best way to support the Liberty Movement is to join the Libertarian Party at lp.org. Give us a like, a share, and a subscribe on whatever platform you're watching from. It helps extend our reach, and we greatly appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday.